Hello, this is Irma Baker welcoming you to our show. We're sponsored by RSVP, the Retired Senior Volunteer Program, and that's a part of Mature Services. According to the dictionary, a kaleidoscope offers a constantly changing group of bright objects, and that's what we hope to achieve with these programs. We're highlighting interesting organizations, activities, and people in our viewing area. After these messages, we'll be right back to meet our guest.
RSVP of Summit County has been making a difference in our community since 1972. RSVP volunteers are increasing the quality of life by participating in programs and organizations that provide important services to the community. RSVP matches personal interests and skills with opportunities to serve. If you're interested in adding more meaning to your life and improving the lives of others, please call 330-253-4597, extension 166.
Welcome back. Our guest today is Lisa Graf from Graf Growers, Garden Center, and Farm Market. Lisa, it's wonderful to have you here with us today. Welcome. Tell us a little bit about Graf's.
Well, thanks, and it's great to be here. Graf Growers is a garden center and farm market, as you mentioned, located in Copley Township, right on the edge of West Akron on White Pond Drive. And it is a family-owned business, and we have a lot of all your gardening needs for the spring, as well as starting in July through October, our farm market opens with locally grown fresh fruits and vegetables. And as a note, we are part of the Mature Services voucher program as well.
Oh, so then you redeem the vouchers that people can get through Mature Services for produce?
That's correct.
Oh, that's wonderful. Well, I've shopped at your place for a long time, and I always look for your sign when I'm coming down 77, seeing what's going on special at Graf's at whatever time it is. But you're here today to talk to us about senior gardening, and I'm very interested in this because there are so many people who have been avid gardeners, and maybe now they're downsizing a little, or they've moved out of a big house into an apartment or into an assisted living facility, or they just don't have that mobility to do the full-scale gardening. What kind of advice do you have for them from a grower's perspective?
Well, first of all, one of the most wonderful things about gardening is that it transcends all the ages, from youth all the way through your adult life and into the senior years as well. It transcends those things as far as you can still participate in gardening. You may have to make some adjustments. Container gardening is a wonderful way that you can make that adjustment, especially if you're downsizing, maybe you only have a patio or a balcony. But if you are still active and still actively participating in digging in the dirt and that type of thing, there's still some things you could do to make that process a little bit easier. One of the chores of gardening is weeding, and if you use a product like the Preen, you can put that down to prevent weeds. And you put it down in the early spring before the weeds come up, and that way you could have less weeding. It doesn't take care of all weeds, but it does take care of a lot of the weeds, so you can reduce the amount of weeding that you're doing. There's other things that you could do as well, things that make it a little easier on your wrist. The trowels that are ergonomically correct so that there's less the tool does the work instead of your wrist.
So you can actually get tools that are made to prevent wrist problems or just make it easier for you?
I don't think I would say to prevent wrist problems, but to make it easier on your wrist, because the tool will take the pressure rather than your wrist. So you can make some adjustments with the proper tools, maybe some products. You can even use like a slow release fertilizer so you don't have to apply it as often. Osmocote is one example of that, but there are many out there. Just things that you can do to make the process a little bit easier and a little less work, but still so that you can continue to enjoy it. And of course, I think container gardening, whether it would be container flower gardening and even container vegetable gardening, I think is one of the easiest ways to continue to enjoy gardening as a senior.
Well, I think we're going to talk about container gardening in just a little while, but what about small space gardening? What about things like raised gardens or different ways that you can garden if you still are digging out in the dirt there.
Absolutely. Well, small space gardens, really, it's just about making the adapting to your areas. If you've downsized your home and you have a smaller place or maybe a condo, that type of thing. So you still have some space for gardening. Of course, one of my things are pick your favorites. Make sure you incorporate your favorites into that new space. And instead of having a massive area, maybe have a small area with your favorites in it. You certainly can do raised beds, and that can make it easier. You can have pathways, all of those types of things. But they're not necessary if you don't have the means of accomplishing a raised bed. You can still have a very nice garden and incorporate it around your patio area and that type of thing. And I would probably, my first bit of advice would be there to pick your favorites, choose a color combination that's pleasing. And, you know, you can mix vegetables or herbs. Parsley makes a beautiful border. So, for example, if you really enjoyed using a lot of parsley, you could create a little border with the parsley and plant annuals or perennials behind it. Even some of the ground cover, some of the herbs that grow low, like thyme, can be a bit of a ground cover, as well as an herb that you can enjoy in your kitchen.
Well, that sounds like it's a double duty garden. Not only do you get a nice aesthetic look of a garden, but it's also something that you can use.
Sure, you can maximize your efforts. A lot of people have been doing fun and novel things for their garden as well, like the topsy-turvy gardens with the tomato plants growing upside down from like a shepherd's rod. But there are other plants that you could grow in a hanging basket. Sometimes people will grow a cucumber in a hanging basket.
You can grow a cucumber in a hanging basket?
You can, although I would caution, I would not expect a lot of production. You definitely can do it. You definitely will get some cucumbers, but you wouldn't get maybe as much production. You would probably get more production if you grew it in a pot.
And cucumbers will grow well in a pot?
Mm-hmm. They will grow in a pot as well. Mm-hmm. Or peppers.
So peppers, cucumbers, certainly tomatoes. I mean, we see all those patio tomatoes.
Even potatoes can be grown in a pot.
Oh, now you're really blowing me away. You can grow potatoes in a pot?
Sure you can, but it needs to be a very large pot.
Uh-huh.
But yes, you can. Mm-hmm.
And how would you care for these gardens? Is there a difference between caring for a container garden as opposed to a down in the dirt garden?
Well, you have to make, again, some adaptations, things that to adjust to. Things like you might want to use a tomato cage rather than a tomato stake in a pot, because the cage would support the tomato better, because it would have 4 legs going into the pot instead of just one, and it would stand up a little easier. You can adjust. You'll have to provide water, because in the ground they can root in a lot deeper and then absorb water from below, as well as the water you provide during drought times. But in a container, you pretty much have to water it all of the time, because the foliage will create a canopy that will prevent the rain from coming in unless it's a really hard rain. So, and fertilization, regular fertilization, those types of things. So yes, you do have to adapt a little bit, but really overall, it's a very similar process to growing them in the ground.
Does it make a difference what kind of potting soil you use?
Certainly. First of all, you want to make sure that you're using potting soil. That would be most important. In containers, you do not want to use topsoil. If you are working still in the ground and you need to add soil, you certainly could add topsoil or even sweet peat, which is a good soil amendment that provides some nutrient qualities as well. But going back to the containers, you definitely want to choose a potting soil, and I would recommend a quality potting soil. And when I say that, you don't want to buy the bargain bag of potting soil.
The dollar bag at the dollar store?
Right, because generally speaking, it doesn't have the amendments to make it a loose soil, and the soil will compact, and then the roots will compact, and you're more prone to rotting and things like that. So just a good quality potting soil. We recommend either the Premier Pro Mix potting soil or Miracle Grow potting soil, but you could choose. There are many other brands out there as well.
Well, what about mulching? Do you have to mulch when you're doing, for instance, a container garden or a small space garden?
Generally speaking, it would not require mulching for container gardening. But in a small space gardening, the purpose of mulching is to retain moisture, to reduce weeding, and aesthetics. And one of the things I've been mulching with recently is the sweet peat. Sweet peat is a soil amendment that can be used as a mulch. It is a combination of vegetable and green compost, as well as manure compost and wood that's ground together, and it makes a wonderful mulch that provides a nutrient quality. So if you are small space gardening, you can buy it in a bag. It's easy to spread, but you could also use like the hardwood mulch as well. Just I think I like the qualities that the sweet pea bring.
Well, you mentioned the word compost, and I'm thinking, what about those orange peels and apple peels and potato peelings that we have in our kitchens when we're doing that? Can you do composting on a small scale if you're doing like container gardening or anything?
You could do composting on a small scale, yes. I would not suggest using composting if you're just doing container gardening, because you're already just using potting soil, and I don't really see a real need to use that compost. On the other hand, if you are still planting, even in a small space garden, you certainly could incorporate composting into that. A little bit of that will depend on, a lot of the condominiums have different rules on those types of things, because compost really needs to be in a location where the compost can work, and equal parts of green and brown need to be added to it. So sometimes the limitations of that small space may or may not allow for the composting.
I didn't realize it was that much of a science to do composting. But what you're saying then is that the potting soils that are made for containers rather than putting as an amendment to yard soil, that those already have everything in that they need, and you don't really need to worry about composting or anything?
That's correct. They come so that they're ready to use.
Well, that's great to know. I didn't realize that.
You may need to add fertilizer, because some brands have fertilizer already mixed in, some do not, and you'll want to watch the label for that. But so you may want to add fertilizer, and you can choose an organic fertilizer if you want to stick with organic gardening as well. But that would be the one thing that you may need to add. But aside from that, the soil is ready to go, ready to plant in.
Now, one of the things that really becomes an issue as people get older is you can't heft those 40-pound bags of potting soil and fertilizer and those kinds of things. I think you mentioned before that there are some amendments that you can add, and by amendments you mean just things that will make it better, make the soil better. Is that pretty easy to find? Can you get things in small sizes that are easier to carry home?
Absolutely. A couple things about that.
Yeah.
Number one is, yes, we carry things in small sizes, and more we're looking at smaller and smaller sizes because it is easier for people to handle. And so that is an important thing. Fertilizer like the Espoma organic fertilizers come in like a 4-pound bag. The sweet pea comes in a 1.5 cubic foot bag, which is smaller than it used to come in a really large bag. Things like that. So yes, you can choose things in smaller bags. The other thing is we offer, and I know many of the other garden centers do as well, offer a delivery service, so we can actually deliver it to your door, put it where you need it, that type of thing. So we can adjust on both ends, because sometimes it's more economical, and especially if you need a quantity, it's more economical to buy the larger units. And so therefore the delivery service, the difference in cost sometimes will outweigh the cost for the delivery service.
So that reminds me, do you have a landscaping service as well?
We do, yes, Graf's Landscape and Design. And as part of that service, we offer two things. We can do any size landscape from small to large, design it and install it, and that would include hardscaping or plants. But we also offer something called a quick plant service. So if you just need like you already have an established bed, but maybe you lost a couple shrubs over the winter or something, and you need to have those taken out and new shrubs put in, we also offer that service. So you can have a small amount done, or even we work in a lot of condominiums where they have just a small space but want to make it their own when they move in and update the landscape and that type of thing. And we can work in those size spaces as well.
One of the things that I really appreciate from what you do is the wonderful website that you have.
Thank you.
I know that you've got Lisa's Green Thumb on it with tips and helps for gardeners. And what is the website?
The website is grafgrowers.com, www.graf, which is Graf, growers, growers.com.
And I know I've gone to it many times, and wonderful tips. We are very lucky in this area to have many good garden centers.
We do.
And we've always been a big gardening and production area, plant production area. And I love the fact that you invited us out to Graf Growers to see some of the things you do there. For instance, a spaghetti garden. So I'm glad that we're going to take this opportunity now to go right out to your center and have you show us what to do there. Graf Growers has been farming locally in this area for 100 years. And in fact, they've been at this location here on White Pond between Copley Road and Interstate 77 for more than 40 years. And they've really become a presence in the gardening world here in our area. And we're very pleased today to be with Lisa Graf, who's going to demonstrate some special gardening tips for us. So Lisa, thanks so much, and it's all yours.
Well, thank you. And welcome to Graf Growers. It's an exciting thing to be talking about gardening, and especially in the spring when the sun is shining and the birds are chirping, the flowers are starting to pop out on all the trees, and such an exciting time in the gardening world. And today we're going to talk a little bit about container gardening, and in particular we're going to be creating a spaghetti garden in this pot. You know, a lot of times people have various reasons, but maybe they have a smaller space for gardening. They have maybe more limited mobility and no longer care to dig in the garden, or maybe just have a small balcony. But if you have a little spot of sunshine, you could still continue to enjoy vegetable gardening as well as flower gardening. You can see I have a pot of flowers that you might consider putting like on your patio or your deck. But in addition, so many people enjoy the taste of fresh tomato. They enjoy the taste of some fresh herbs that they can sprinkle on their salads and that type of thing. And so you can grow those inexpensively on your deck or patio or balcony, that type of thing, in a container. Today we're going to talk first of all about growing a spaghetti pot, and basically it's just a theme garden for a container. If you wanted to, you could just grow a tomato plant in a pot, and if that's your favorite vegetable, you could just enjoy it that way. Or you might also consider growing just an herb pot with your favorite herbs, that type of thing, or even a pepper if you like peppers better than tomatoes. There's lots of different things that you can grow in a pot. For the purposes of our show, we're going to demonstrate a spaghetti garden, and I've chosen some different plants for this garden. You know, first of all, the tomato plant. And the tomato plant, because that's kind of the essence of the tomato sauce, but you might also just enjoy them fresh. But I've also chosen some herbs. Typically we think of basil as the sweet basil, like this, and it's a larger leaf, and it's a fairly large growing plant. Because we have a pot here, the tomato will be the tallest, and then the herbs will be growing around it. So I have chosen, instead of the traditional sweet basil, I have chosen the spicy glow bush basil. And this will grow only about 12 inches high and 12 inches around, and so it will fit more nicely in front of our tomato plant. The parsley, you could choose lots of different kinds of parsley. I've chosen a flat leaf Italian parsley, and that could be used as a garnish as well as in cooking. And then the oregano. Oregano is fairly aggressive growing, so it will have to be pruned throughout the growing season to keep it nice and low and bushy, but it will still be very beautiful in this pot. We'll start first by putting soil in our pot, and then we will plant those. I've put on my gloves. These are the Cool Max mud gloves, and they breathe very nicely, so they're easy to work with, and also they're very lightweight, so you can still feel the plants as you do the planting. I have chosen a scoop for putting the soil in the pot, and I would also tell you that I've chosen a lightweight pot. This is just an inexpensive plastic pot. It's 17 inches in diameter. And that would be about the minimum size you'd want to go if you're going to plant this many plants. You could go larger, but I wouldn't recommend going smaller if you're planting this many plants together, excuse me. So I have a scoop here to scoop the soil in. For purposes of our demonstration, I've already filled the pot part way. I've chosen a Pro Mix potting soil. The Pro Mix potting soil is a lightweight mix. It has some perlite in it to keep the soil loose so that the roots will grow nicely. And you could choose any type of potting soil that you would like, but I would definitely recommend potting soil and not topsoil. Topsoil is not as loose of a mix, and therefore it can compact and cause the roots to kind of smother from the compaction in a container. It works well in the garden, but not in a pot. So this is the Pro Mix potting mix. I especially like the soil because it's very lightweight and easy to work with, but does very well. The plants grow very well in a container in it. Okay, we're going to fill it almost to the top, about maybe an inch and a half from the rim, and pack it in, just not real tightly, but just a little bit, because it'll have some air in it and it will be loose. We'll add a little bit more soil. I'm making a little bit of a mess here, as you can see. Okay, so we've added a little bit more soil, and you have to remember that the soil is going to pack down just a little bit, and so therefore I filled it just a little bit higher, just about an inch from the top, and that way when we add water, if you don't have a scoop, an empty pot works fine. It's very easy to use an empty pot as well as your scoop. Then we'll put the plants in. First, I'm going to put the tomato plant, and we'll pop it out of the pot. Well, it's just not wanting to come today. There we go. And, oops, I forgot one thing. We'll back up a little bit. I have chosen to use some of the tomato toned fertilizer. I have pre-measured it. It's 3 tablespoons per plant. I've pre-measured it. I'm going to add it to our pot. I'm going to spread it out over the surface, and I'm going to work it in just to the top inch or so of the soil. You can reapply this fertilizer. It lasts about 6 weeks. If you have a different kind of fertilizer you wish to use, just follow the directions for that. Now we're going to put the tomato, and I'm choosing to put it in the back. Oftentimes people will put the tomato plant in the middle, but because we're planting the herbs in front of it, I'm going to put it in the back of the pot. Just move the soil aside, set it down in, and then put the soil back in around it. Sometimes you have to add a little bit of soil, but in this case I do not. Then I'm going to put the basil, and I'm going to leave the label with it, but if you wanted a fancier label, you could also choose like special plant labels that you could put in with each plant. I didn't mention, but this variety of tomato is Celebrity, which is a really nice kind of a middle-sized, medium-sized tomato, very juicy and flavorful. You could choose a big boy, or you could even choose like a grape or a cherry tomato plant as well, or even a plum tomato if you like to use that for some of the different mozzarella salads that are so good. I would not choose a real big tomato like a beefsteak, because in a pot it would be a little harder to grow them because the fruit is so heavy. All right, we'll add the parsley to one side. And then we will add, the same way I just made a little indentation. You want to loosen the roots just a little bit on the bottom so they spread out quicker in the container. And then we're going to set this down in the pot. And then we'll add our label again. And the last one again is the oregano. We'll do the same thing, setting the little tag aside for a minute. Separate the roots just a little bit at the bottom, and then tuck it into the pot the same way. We'll just make a little hole, set it in, and put the soil around it. Now, from here, there's a few decisions that have to be made. One is, how will we hold the tomato plant up? In one that I had done for a demonstration, to have already ready-made over here, I put a tomato cage over the plant, and that looks very nice. And it will hold the tomato very well in the pot. I also put this in a clay pot, and the reason I put it in the clay pot is because sometimes if you have a wind issue, you would like the weight of the pot, but it's not necessary other than for weight. And then the other thought might be that you might want to use like a tomato spiral like this, and you can enter it insert it into the pot like this, and then use a tie like the twist 'em ties. It's just a paper covered wire to tie the plant to it. Now the plant is too small right now, but as it grows you would be able to attach it to that. If you didn't like herbs, but you like the idea of growing a tomato pot, you might consider a salad bowl pot. And you could plant some of the little baby lettuce plants or even lettuce seeds around the edge. So it's kind of a fun way to do that. Then the other thing we should talk about is watering. After the plant is planted, then you'll want to get out your watering can and water it really thoroughly. And don't be afraid to give it a lot of water when you go to water it. You want to cover the soil all the way around. And for purposes of our demonstration, I'm not going to go any further with watering, but you do want to water it thoroughly. I would say probably the entire can. All right, and there you have it. A spaghetti garden is ready to go.
Lisa, tell us, is there any special advice that you can give to the older gardener?
If you enjoy gardening, don't give up gardening. You may have limitations, whether it would be your facility, if you've downsized, or physical limitations. Either way, if you enjoy gardening, look at opportunities for adapting and still be able to garden, whether it's just a hanging basket or a pot on your balcony, something like that. But you can continue to enjoy the pleasure of growing things. It may even be just a house plant, but you can continue to enjoy gardening in a little different fashion. So if that's what you enjoy, please don't give up.
Well, thank you so much. I think you've given us all a lot of encouragement. It's been great having you with us, and it's been great having all of you with us. Thank you so much for watching today's view through our kaleidoscope. We hope you enjoyed it and that you'll remember our sponsor, RSVP, part of Mature Services. RSVP offers adults age 55 and over volunteer opportunities in the local community. For more information about RSVP, call the number on the screen. This is Irma Baker, saying goodbye for now, and thank you for watching.
Since 1971, RSVP has been matching volunteers' talents to community needs. RSVP is affiliated with the Corporation for National and Community Service, a national organization that supports service and volunteering through grant-funded projects. Volunteers organize neighborhood watch programs, tutor children, renovate homes, plant community gardens, assist victims of natural disasters, and serve their communities in many other ways. RSVP offers maximum flexibility and choice to its volunteers as it matches the personal interests and skills of Americans 55 and older with opportunities to serve their communities. If you're interested in adding more meaning to your life and improving the lives of others, please call 330-253-4597, extension 166.
Distribution of this program has been made possible through the generous support of the Kaler Law Firm. At the Kaler Law Firm, attorney Jim Kaler helps seniors and veterans who need long-term care keep some of their life savings in the family. For more information, visit www.protectingseniors.com. The mission of the Kaler Law Firm is protecting a senior's life savings.